Okay, a good yard. Today's daf is daf Yud Zayin, and we are going to start 16 lines from the bottom of Tes Zayin Amud Beis. We technically started this on the last recording, but it makes sense to go back and start this one again. Taner Rabbanan, Yom Tov Shechal Yez Be'erev Shabbos. If Yom Tov falls out on Friday, Ein Ma'arvin Le'eruvei Tchumen v'lo Eruvei Chatzeros. On Yom Tov, on that Friday, you can't make Eruvei Tchumim, so you can travel more than the Alpayamama. V'lo Eruvei Chatzeros, so you can carry it from one chaser to the other. Rabbi argues and says, Ma'arvin Eruvei Chatzeros, you can make Eruvei Chatzeros, Avaloi Eruvei Tchumim, but he's masking that you can't make an Eruv Tchumim. Why? Because Chazal can aser something that you're not allowed to do, but Chazal are not going to aser you from doing something that's mutter for you to do. In other words, on Yom Tov you are allowed to carry, but you're not allowed to travel out of the Tchum. So it makes sense that you cannot make the Tchum for Shabbos on Yom Tov, because you can't do it on Yom Tov either. However, I am allowed to carry from one chaser to the other on Yom Tov. So don't tell me that I can't make the Erev for Shabbos on that same day of Yom Tov. Rashi uses the lashon of ein kayach biyadcha le'eser le'milasakein l'machar. The whole thing is a tikkun. So the Chassam Sofer explains what Rashi means to say is that I'm not really fixing anything if it's mutter for me to carry today and I want to make an Eruv Chatzeros for tomorrow. All I'm doing is being manea the Isser from coming in. I'm not fixing a problem. That normal tikkun mutter is I have something that's problematic, I fix it. But here, there's no Isser in the first place for me to fix. I'm staving off the Isser of carrying from one Chatzer to the other from coming on Shabbos. Itmar Amar Rav halacha k'Tanakama v'Shmuel Amar halacha k'Rebbe. We have a machlekes Rav and Shmuel whether we paskin like the Tanakama that both are usher to do on Friday, or like Rebbe that you cannot make the Eruvei Tchumim but you could make the Eruvei Chatzeros. Iboilu halacha k'Rebbe lekula or lechumra, which sounds like a strange question. Is Rebbe being lekula chumra? I mean, pshita de lekula ka'amar. Like Rebbe said that it's mutter to make the Eruvei Chatzeros on Friday. That's pretty much a kula. So the Gemara explains that really what Shmuel said that we pass like Rebbe is ambiguous because the Shalach Rebbe Elazar legaila loikisha atim shayim bebavel. The Brisa shouldn't be quoted like the way you have it in Bavel. Rebbe matir v'chacham Eisrim, but rather Ella Rebbe Eiser v'chacham matirim. So Rebbe is lechumra. So that's now the shaila. Which gears of the Brisa do we go with? Was Rebbe saying it lechumra or lekula? Tashmar Rav Tachlifa bar Avdimi Ovid Uvda Kavasi Shmuel. There was a story once that Rav Tachlifa bar Avdimi did like Shmuel. Rav, and on that Rav said, Tchilas Hayrod, the Haitzur Merabon Kilkula. This first psak of this young rabbi of Rav Tachlif bar Avdimi who did like Shmuel was a kilkul. So first of all, it's very stark what he said, but the fact that he called the psak of Shmuel a kilkul. So yeah, Rabbi Shleim Lakula Kamer, if you're telling me that Shmuel is passing Rabbi Lakula, why it's a kilkul, Hainu Kilkula. Because people are doing something that's aser. Ella I amrit l'chumra. If you tell me Rebbe was coming to aser, so my kilkula ika, why would we call that a chumra if Rebbe is saying that it's aser? And for the Gemara, kivin to makalkuli barabim, since there will be a kilkul to the rabbim that they won't be able to carry because they won't be able to make this eruv chatzeres, have a kilkula. That's called a kilkul. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav Huna, halacha kerebbe v'la aser, and the halacha lemaisa we paskin like Rebbe, both aser to make every tchum and eruv chatzeres. Okay, now the Gemara is going to shift gears and talk about the davening of the Shemayna Esrei. Taner Rabbanan Yom Tov Shechal Yis B'Shabbos, when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos. Beishamei Omer, what do? Mispalel Shemayna, you daven 8 brachas. V'Omer Kol V'Omer Shel Shabbos B'Fnei Atzma V'Shel Yom Tov B'Fnei Atzma. So now there's the structure of Shemayna Esrei. You got the first 3 brachas in the beginning, you got the last 3 brachas at the end. You got Zok Beishamei 2 in the middle, 1 for Shabbos, 1 for Yom Tov. Beis Hillel Aimer Mispal Sheva. You keep it 7 brachas. Maschil b'shel Shabbos. That middle bracha begins with Shabbos. Umisayim b'shel Shabbos, and that middle bracha ends with Shabbos. V'Aimer kedusha sayim be'emtza. But it's one singular bracha. So that coupled with the 3 in the beginning and 3 at the end makes 7 brachas for Shemoneh Esrei. Rabbi Aimer av chaysim ba mekadesh hashabbos Yisrael v'yazmanim. Rabbi says you end off the bracha mekadesh hashabbos. Note the order. Then Yisrael v'hazmanim. Tani Tanakh Ravina. A different version of that, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Shabbos v'Zmanim. You switch the order of the Shabbos and the Yisrael. To which Ravina didn't like that. Amar Lei, Ravina said, Otu Shabbos Yisrael Mekadshile. Is what you're making it sound like Yisrael comes before Shabbos. Somehow Yisrael is Mekadesh the Shabbos. It's not true. Shabbos Yisrael Mekadshile. For Shabbos Mekadshile V'Kaima. From Sheshes Mei Bereshis, Shabbos was Kaddish. That's not Klal Yisrael's doing. We are not sanctifying the Shabbos because we don't set up the Zmanim for that. Ela Ema Mekadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'Hazmanim. But rather you do first Shabbos and then Yisrael v'Hazmanim. I saw, I forget who, I saw in the Masifta Gemara. Very interesting what we call it. We always refer to the Yom Tovim as Zmanim because that's really our chelik in it. We are the ones who are kaveh when the Rosh Chodesh is, when Mela, it's always v'Hazmanim because that's not really Yontif, that's just the time. But the time is Kaveh Yontif. We don't make Yontif. You know, Kadosh Baruch Hu makes Yontif based on the day, but we say what the day is. Okay. V'amar Rabbi Yosef halacha ki Rebbe u'ketitritz Ravina. The halacha is like Rebbe, and this according to Ravina's version of it, meaning first you say Yisrael, first Shabbos, then Yisrael, and then Zman. Okay, one more Shmoneh Esrei dik halacha. Tana Rabbanan. Shabbos shechal liyos b'Rosh Chodesh oy b'chol Shel Moed. Let's say you have Shabbos that falls out on Rosh Chodesh or Chol Moed. So then Arvis v'Shacharis u'Mincha Nispal Sheva. All those Shmoneh Esrei you daven 7 brachas. The Omer me'ena ma'ira ba'avaydi. You say the Al v'Yavay in the bracha of Ritzei. The Imloy Amar, and if you fail to say it, then Machzir, and you got to repeat Shmoneh Esrei. And this brisa is very, seems almost like oversimplifying, when you're Machzirin. And we know the halacha lemaisa is that you don't do it by Ma'ariv. You don't say, if you miss Rosh Chodesh Yal V'Yavai by Ma'ariv, you don't repeat Shmoneh Esrei. So the Shita says, okay, that's we're being a little lavdaf here. But lemaisa, it's a little bit of a horror because the brisa is not machalik. So some of the other Mefarshim are bothered by that. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Aimer b'Haida, you actually said the Al V'Yavai in Haida, not like what we do, but that's what Rabbi Eliezer Shita is. Musafin, and on the Musaf Shmoneh Esrei, Maschil b'Shel Shabbos, U'Masayim b'Shel Shabbos, v'Aimer Kedusha Zayim be'emtza. Okay, so you actually put it in the middle of that Shabbos bracha. So it comes out that both Rabbi Eliezer and the Tanna Kama both agree that you don't mention Chol HaMoed or Rosh Chodesh in the middle of the regular Shabbos davening, right? You only do the Al V'Yavai in Avodah. However, the Bryce is going to say now someone who's chaylik. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shmuel ben Eishel, Rabbi Yechim Breika, Ayimrim, Kol Mokum Shehuskik L'Sheva. Whenever you have a halacha, you got to say 7 brachas, like whether Shabbos, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, doesn't matter. Then Maschil b'Shel Shabbos, Messiah b'Shel Shabbos, Ayimrim Kedusha Zayim be'emtza. We do insert these things in the middle of the bracha. Rav Huna ein halacha kaisa zug. And the halacha does not follow that pair of tanoim, that zug, that hold that in the middle of the bracha of Shmoneh Esrei, you change it for Rosh Chodesh Chol HaMoed, but rather we do what we do, which is you just say it in Yal V'Yavai. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, Meiniach Adam Eruvei Tchumim, Mi Yom Tov Lechaveru Masna. Let's say you got a Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. So on the 2 days of Thursday and Friday, I realized, I didn't make an Eruv Tchumim, and I got to walk to some Simcha on Shabbos. So what I'll do is, I will on Thursday make an Eruv, and I'll make it with a Tanai. I'll say, if today is weekday, so then I have no problem making an Eruv. And if today is the first day of Yom Tov, then tomorrow I'll make the Eruv. I'll do the same thing tomorrow with that same loaf. Omerava miniach adam Eruv tavshilin mi Yom Tov lechaver masna. Zok Rava, if you got a Thursday, Friday, Shabbos situation of Yom Tov, a person not only can do the Eruv Tchumim, he's adding now that you can make an Eruv tavshilin. And you'll say, I'll make an Erev Tavshilin the same kind of Tanai. If today is Chayil, so then it's no big deal. I'm allowed to make the Erev Tavshilin. It's Erev Yom Tov. If today is Yom Tov, then tomorrow is Chayil. So tomorrow I don't need to worry about preparing for Shabbos because it's Chayil. Now, of course, the Tzlach asks what's L'cher a bomb kasher. Like, why do you make a Tanai here at all? If in the case we just spoke out, if today is Chayil, so it's fine to make an Erev. If tomorrow's Chayil, you don't need an Erev Tavshilin. So why are you making a Tanai? It's not about the Tanai. Just make a regular Erev Tavshilin, and it either works or it doesn't work, but you don't need it. So they give different terutzim to me either because really you can make an Erev Tavshilin for a future Yom Tif, or maybe because it I think it's in Simchas Yom Tif says it just doesn't look covered for Yom Tif, so we want to speak out the Tanai. But l'chayra, it's a fair ha'ara that you just don't need a Tanai at all. Now the Gemara is saying, okay, so you have these 2 halachas, one is Erev Tchumim and one is Erev Tavshilin. So Madam Eruvei Tchumim, Kol Shkein Eruvei Tavshilin. Umadam Erev Tavshilin, according to Madam who says you should do an Erev Tavshilin, Rava, Aval Eruvei Tchumim loy. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can make an Erev Tchumim. My timer, why wouldn't you be able to make Erev Tchumim? Deliktin Shvisa B'Shabbat loy, because you can't acquire this Shvisa B'Shabbata, which Rashi says is Lavdafke, it really means Yom Tif. In other words, you can't acquire this on Yom Tif. That's going to be Usr, which is a little bit difficult to understand. This is like a tikkun, frak Taisvis. Why don't you say Pashit? This is Hachana. I mean, you're preparing for Shabbos after Yom Tif. So Taisvis learns the Gemara differently, and that the whole issue is a Hachana-related issue. Tana Rabbanan, ein oifen mi Yom Tov lechaveru. You can't bake for one day of Yom Tif for the other day of Yom Tif. In other words, you're only supposed to make food for that given day. Be'emes amru, but lamaisa they said, right? That's a lashon of but memala isha kol ha-kedera basar. A woman can fill up the whole kedera, the whole pot with meat, and cook it on Yom Tif. Even though she only needs one piece, but she can make extra. And that will be because in the leftovers she'll be able to use for the other day of Yom Tif. Similarly, also the baker can fill the whole barrel and boil it on in Yom Tif. Even though he only needs one keli's worth, but can fill up the whole chavis. But regarding the baking, he can only bake what he needs for that day, because then there's a tircha yisera in the other loaves. To that, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, a woman can fill up the entire oven with bread on Yom Tif, even if she only needs one loaf. Why? Yafa Bizman Shatan Mole. Because Lamaisa, the pas bakes bread better when there's more bread in there, because I guess it's mamayat the amount of heat that can dissipate. So the bread bakes better if it's fuller. So the point here is that you're allowed to be marbe b'shiyurim on Yom Tif, and as long as you just don't do a specific tircha yisera. But if the tircha yisera is justified because it'll somehow make the food better, then it's going to be mutter. And taka amar Rava halacha Rishim ben Elazar. The halacha is like Rishim ben Elazar. Now this is a major halacha of marbe b'shiyurim. So just to back up a little bit, the Gemara in Menachos on Mem Daled. I hope I got that right. Yeah, I think it's Menachos Mem Daled. There's a Rava declares a shaila about a chayla shish beisakana on Shabbos that he needs to eat 2 te'anim, right? He needs 2 figs. So I have 2 options. I can clip off 2 individual figs, or I can clip off one branch that has 3 figs on it. Okay, so once again, either you're doing 2 maisim to be Mechal Shabbos, or 1 maisa, but you're actually taking more than you need. And the Gemara, after batting it around, comes out saying, no, better to do 2 maisim and not to take the 1 maisa that has too much. Not which has the 3 te'anim. In other words, we're makbid on marbe b'shiurim for Shabbos. Now that is a machlokes rishonim, a very yesodistic machlokes rishonim over there in what the pshat in the Gemara is. Taisus and the Rashba hold that really there is no iser daraisa of marbe b'shiurim. The whole thing is an iser darabanan. So by this iser darabanan, Chazal are makbid. You shouldn't be marbe b'shiurim. So when it comes to Yom Tif, for sure, Simchas Yom Tif will be mekel, and you're allowed to now be, the woman can add all the extra chatichas in the kedera because we're mekel by Simchas Yom Tif. We're not mekel on Shabbos. But the Ran doesn't like that. The Ran by us, he says that if that's the case, then why by that case in Menachos? If it's only Darabanan, then of course you should just clip off do the 1 maisa and get all 3 te'anim. He doesn't like that also. He learns really marbe b'shiurim by Shabbos is an iser de'iraisa. So why is it completely mutter here by Yom Tif? Well, Pashut, Zok the Ram, because by Shabbos is Dechuya, the whole thing. So when it's Dechuya, you're only allowed to do that which you absolutely need. Over by Yom Tif, preparing food on the Yom Tif is Hutra. So when it's Hutra, I don't have to be so careful, and I can actually add, as long as I'm not doing a Tircha Shleil Tzarech Yom Tif, the extra shear, we're not makbid on, so it's totally mutter. But marbe b'shiurin, when there's an isser marbe b'shiurin according to Ran, it's deraisa. Some Sefer explains that even when the Ran says deraisa, he doesn't mean like an isser deraisa that a person will get skila for. It's more like chatzi shir aser min atayra kind of a deraisa, that kind of level. But al kol panim, we have a very serious thing about machlekes whether marbe b'shiurim is deraisa drabanan, and what the pshat here is in the Yom Tif. Why is it mutter by Yom Tif? Rav Moshe in the Igros Moshe Orach Chaim Chelik Hey Siman Lamed Hey brings a shaila about somebody who had a key ring on Yom Tif, and there were lots of keys on it, but he only needed one of the keys. And his shaila was, my mechuyev to remove all the keys that I'm not using before I walk outside. Interesting shaila. Rav Moshe says, yeah, it's usher to carry all those keys, and you got to take off all the other keys that you don't need. So the kasha was, Rav Moshe has a different tshuva in Chelik Beis Orach Chaim Siman Kov Gimel that says, a guy who has a pack of cigarettes, it's mutter to smoke on Yom Tov, right? So he has his cigarettes, and he knows he needs his 10 cigarettes a day. But, as we all know, there are 20 cigarettes in a pack of cigarettes. So Rav Moshe says, don't worry, it's mutter for you to carry the whole pack of 20 cigarettes, even though you're only going to smoke 10 of them. So what's the difference? Why are you allowed to have all 20 cigarettes in the box, but you can't have the extra keys that you're not having in your key ring? And Rav Moshe says, it's a pasha de chilik. The chilik is because by the keys, you aren't shaykh to those other keys. You're not going to use them at all on Yom Tif. But by the cigarette pack, every single cigarette in there is just as shaykh as the other one. So therefore, each one of them is roi for you on Yom Tif, and therefore they're all tzarech of Yom Tif. And Rav Moshe tells to our Gemara here in Beya, because by here, the woman who adds more pieces of meat to the kedera, each given piece of meat is just as shaykh to us as the other one. And that's the reason the marbe b'shiurin is okay, because all of it is considered tzarech Yom Tif. Sure, I'm not going to eat all of it, but any one of the given pieces are just as shaykh as the other ones. It comes out that if the woman was to add a piece of meat for her animals, or I don't know, maybe that's something that's mamish not negeya, it would be usher. Reb Chaim Ozer even brings, he doesn't, still I found this in the Masifta Gemara, that the Achiezer says, if a person was to carry davar that's mutter for him to carry, let's say his sitter for shul, with a rock, and it's the same avodah, there's no extra tircha. But that's usher, mamish usher gomer, because he's not shaykh to that rock. So too here also, as long as each individual thing that you're being marbe b'shiurin you're shaykh to, that's going to be considered tzarech of Yom Tif. Based on that, Reb Zilberstein brings in the Cheshuke Chemed that a guy who has to take his wife to the hospital on Shabbos for a baby, and he wants to know, should I take my whole wallet, right? Because it'll be convenient to have the money in there, plus maybe I'll need some other cards, but I don't know, maybe not. But can I just take the whole wallet, or do I need to dafka take the dollar bills or the pieces of things, the things that I'm going to for sure need? So he said, Mitzad marba b'shiurin, you're not shaykh to those other things you don't need. So that's not called marba b'shiurin, based on what Ramesh is saying. And anyway, he says that's worse because that's an isser of muktzah for Shabbos. So we're talking about here of Yom Tif, which is more hutra. Okay, now the Gemara is a fascinating shaila. Let's say a guy didn't make Erev Tavshilin, and now we want to know how to deal with him. Hu ne'asar, he can't make for anything for Shabbos. The kimchai ne'asar are his supplies. The Gemara is giving an example of kimchai, but is his kemach also aser? Hu ne'asar ve'ein kimchai ne'asar. So, what is the shailak? L'may nafkamina laknuya kimchai lecherem. Whether or not does he need to now give over his kemach to somebody else in order that they should make it for him? So yamar hu ne'asar ve'kimchai ne'asar. If you tell me he's aser and his kemach aser, so now it's tzarach laknuya kimchai. You got to make it no longer mine. You got to make it his. V'yamar hu ne'asar ve'ein kimchai ne'asar lo tzarach laknuya kimchai lecherem. But if you're telling me it's not his kemach's not ne'asar, then anybody else can just take the flour without making it theirs and bake for him. So Zok the Gemara, Tashma, Mishla Hiniach Eruv Tavshilin, Harizel Lo Yoifev, Lo Yavashav, Lo Yatmin, Lo Loiv, Lo Lacherem. He can't make it for him, he can't make it for somebody else. Lo Lacherem Oifim Vashan Loi. So Ketzad Hu Isa, what should he Lamaisa do if he doesn't make it Eruv Tavshilin? Makne Kimchay Lacherem, Ba Oifim Lo Vashan Loi. He should be makne his kemach to somebody else so they can be Vashal for him. Shema Mina, Hu Neser, the Kimchay Neser. Now, this way we read the Gemara is the gears that we have in the way that Rashi understands the Gemara. But Taisus asks, L'char is such a hard Gemara to understand. So look at the top bottom. Says Tema Hoyel the Kimchei Neser. If his kemach is aser, so Mamuel Knaya Lacher. What good is it going to do to give to somebody else? Couldn't they take away the isser just because they are allowed to cook? Still, the kemach is aser. Also, if he can't cook because it's aser for him, then what good is it for somebody else to cook for him? They shouldn't be able to do for him either. The Rashba uses an expression of shlucha shalom kemaisai. So because of that, Tais is a completely different Gemara here. His Girsa says that if the kemach is not usser, now I have the opportunity and the ability to have somebody else do it for me because the kemach's not usser. But if you're telling me that the kemach is usser, game over. There's nothing that can be done. This stuff can't be given to somebody else. It's taka usser. But the Gemara's maskana is hu neser v'kimchei neser. Okay. Now, iboilhu, new shaila, over v'afamai. Let's say a guy was over the Isser Darabanan. He did not do what he was supposed to do. He cooked for Shabbos anyway, without an Erev Tavshilin. What's the status of this food? So now the Gemara is going to attempt, I think it's 5 different rayas that we're going to be daiche. And at the end, we're not going to have a clear maskana. But in the meantime, let's try to go through all the 5 rayas. Tashma, mishaloi hiniach eruv tavshilin. If a guy doesn't have an Erev Tavshilin, what does he do? Ketzad oisa, makneo kimchei lacherim, v'acherim oiflim v'vashlei. Somebody else can cook and bake for him. V'im isan, if you're telling me that someone who baked food without making an Erev Tavshilin could eat the food, then l'char you have another eitzah. Listening over v'afar mutter. If you're telling me the brisa that says what happens if I didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, one of the options is you did it anyway. The Gemara says, okay, that's not a raya. Amar Ravada bar Masna, Tana takanta de heter katani, takanta de isur katani. It's not the derech to give a takana. Here's a suggestion. Do the wrong thing. That wouldn't be a takana. So that's number 1 is out. Number 2, Tashma, have another brisa. Mishay niyacher ruvei tavshilin, someone who did make a proper Erev Tavshilin. Hariza oifa umavashal umatmin. You could bake, you cook, yeah, right? V'emrotza le'achol se ruvei harshas biyada. If you want to eat the eruv that you made on Yom Tov, you're allowed to. Achlei adchlei ofa. If you ate it before you cooked or baked, you're not allowed to cook or bake or do anything. You can't cook for yourself or for anybody else. And other acherim can't cook for him, but he can cook for Yom Tov. If he has a little left over, it's fine for Shabbos. As long as he doesn't do a harama where he pretends like, oh, I might have a lot of guests coming over. That kind of harama is not permitted. But if he has a little leftovers, he can use the leftovers for Shabbos. And let's say he does go out of his way, makes a harama. So there's a long-winded brisa to get to this punchline. If he makes a harama, it is usher. The food is usher. So l'chayr, you see that if you go ahead and do the wrong thing, it's going to be usher. So just like the harama is usher, so too if you didn't make an Erev Tavshilin, the food should be usher. Amar Rashi, that is not a raya because harama kamret. If the guy's making a harama, it's different. Shani harama dechmira barabanan tfei mezid. We're more machmir by harama than we are by mezid. And Rashi's beautiful way explains it. A person who does things by harama, they don't even realize they did anything wrong. In their own mind, they did something. They're not going to do tshuva. It's like perfect Motzei Yom Kippur daf here. A person who doesn't realize he did anything wrong is the worst matziv because he'll never do the tshuva for it. But if a person knows he did something amazing, okay, so he'll be chayzer. He'll have charata. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, I'll tell you another reason why this particular brisa may not be a raya. Even if you want to tell me harama would be the same as b'mezid, because hamani chananya hiva liba de beis shammai. It's a super duper machmer chananya liba de beis shammai. The Tanya chananya omer beis shammai omerim ein oifen ela imkin Erev b'pas, ve'ein mevashel ela imkein erev b'tavshil. You got to actually cook and bake with those exact kinds of minim. Ve'ein toimnin ela imkein hayu chamet muna me'erev Yom Tif. Beis Hillel Oimrim doesn't matter. Ma'arav tavshil echad v'yisa kol tzarkai. So Beis Shammai, according to Hananiah's version of Beis Shammai, is that you must bake if you want to bake for Shabbos Yom Tov. You must cook if you want to cook for him. It's like, you have to have that parallel kind of foodstuffs. And that shows that he's very machmer. So if he's very machmer and he's the Tana of this Brisa, Ken Zayin, you don't have a raya that harama would be an economy. Harama is usher, and maybe but it's not necessarily a raya that b'mezid would be usher. Agav, over here is where the Rabbeinu Tam in Tosfos says what we mentioned in the previous year, that lahalacha lamaisa, he holds you need to, his halacha lamaisa, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that a person who makes an Erev Tavshilin really does have to make that same kind of min. If he wants to cook for Yom Tov, he has to make an Erev Tavshilin out of cooked food, and likewise for baking and hatman and that sort of thing. And he's not saying like Beis Shammai, he's saying like Beis Hillel, but he understands Beis Hillel that agrees to that philosophy as well. Tanan, attempt number 3. Hamaser peiraisa b'Shabbos b'shegeg yayachal. Someone who, you're not allowed to take meiser on Shabbos, right? It's maybe misakin. But if you do it b'shegeg, then you're allowed to eat it b'mezid layachal. Okay, so you see, if you do b'mezid the wrong thing, maybe you're not allowed to eat the food. It's not a raya that if you don't have an Erev Tavshilin, you can't eat it. The guy had other food to eat. So when we say you're not allowed to make two meiser, we can be extra strict on this guy because he had other things to eat anyway. Tashma hamatvel kelim b'Shabbos. A person who does tevilas kelim, which is not allowed, is also tikkun mana. B'shogeg yishtamish b'hen. If he does b'shogeg, he's allowed to use the kelim. B'mezid lo yishtamish b'hen. So l'chayr, same thing. You do it b'mezid, you're not allowed to use it. Like tzricha disnei mani achrini. He had other kelim, so there's a big time on him for doing the tefillah on Shabbos. Or inami, another idea after b'sheila. You can always borrow kelim. And don't ask, well, couldn't you always also borrow food? No, I think it's the shita. They say you can't borrow food. People make food for themselves. That's not the kind of thing that's lent easily. Tashma. Raya number 5, Hamavashel b'Shabbos, someone who cooks illegally on Shabbos. Okay, that's a serious thing. He cooks on Shabbos. Then b'shogeg yayachel, but mezid layachel. So you see, even mezid, you don't get to eat it. It's the same thing. Even mezid, if you don't have an Erev Tavshilin. And for the Gemara, Isuri the Shabbos shiny. Now, the chumrah of Isuri deraisa of Shabbos is not the same thing, and you can't compare. So the Lamaisa, the Gemara has no maskana, and the Rosh paskins lakula, because you see all these different brises are trying to find kula. So that's how the Rosh paskins it. Beis Shammai Oimrim Shnei Tavshilin. You have to have 2 different cooked foods for an Erev Tavshilin. Masnisin like Tana. This following Mishnah is okay. Our Mishnah is not like the following Tana. De Tanya Amar of Shimon ben Elazar Maidim Beis Shammai u Beis Hillel, that they both agree al Shnei Tavshilin Tzarchli. You need 2 different minim. What's the whole machlokes? Al dagu beitzah sholav. It's only about a fish with an egg on it. Beis Shammai Oimrim Shnei Tavshilin. Those bleibt only 1 tavshil, and you need two tavshil. Beis Hillel Oimrim tavshil echad. The reason why that's okay is because that counts as 2 different tavshilim. V'shavin shimpir per beya v'nasin l'seichadag. If you mash an egg and put it inside the fish, or you take this other kind of vegetables and you put it inside the fish, and that blibes like 2 dishes. Anyway, this Tana holds that the Machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel was about what's called two different tafshilim. But Avadi, they both agreed to a tafshilim. That's not like us. We hold that they're really legitimately arguing whether or not you need 1 or 2. The halach is like our Tana, but leave it to Beis Hillel, that you only need 1 of 2 dishes. If someone ate or lost the Erev, you cannot cook as a result of it. So if you started and you eat the Erev, you're allowed to finish. You're allowed to finish the job of cooking. And it's just a little bit of a shaila in the Rishonim. How far along in the process are you? What are you allowed to do? Can you make more? But Al Kapanim, there certainly is a heter as long as the Erev Tavshilin was there when you started. All right, there'll be no shir. There'll be no recorded shir for Shabbos, and Mr. Hashem will pick it up with Sunday's daf.